Well, good morning again. Good to see everybody here. In case you didn't know, we're going to start a new series today. A new series of going back to Joshua. Going back to Joshua. And of course, we don't just always jump into the book. We've got to do an introduction to it. Got to set the stage. We have to set the stage so he knows what's going on. And so we'll do that today. And then tomorrow, we'll get to, did I just advance?
Tomorrow. You said tomorrow.
I was like, whoa, advanced on me. And so next week, we will, as Paul Harvey says, we'll get to the rest of the story. That'll be next week. But now, we are going to get the background on it. Because, this book, we know it's the first book of the histories. The first 5 books is the Pentateuch, which was written by Moses, and then Joshua is the first book of the histories. It deals with the conquest of Canaan, and there's a lot of things that are brought up about that. Going back to the Promised Land. Once been there, never taken it back. And through this series, we're going to look at the history. Just to warn you, my undergrad degree is in military history. So sorry if I geek out a few times on you. I'm just giving you forewarning. Through these conquests, I might geek out and really get into it. I'll bring up stuff about archaeology. And how that is dealing with what we have in Joshua. Of course, we're going to be looking at probably a very important question is how can a loving God order Joshua to commit genocide on so many cities? He ordered them, and they did. They carried out wiping out entire cities. How does that fit into who God is? And that's a very good question. And we're going to be talking about that as we go through this book. But first, a little intro. And if you've ever read through Joshua, which hopefully you've had, or if I encourage you to get on the Bible reading plan that we have, the chronological Bible reading plan. Because right now we're in Leviticus, but we're going to catch up and read through Joshua starting in March. So it's a great time to jump on board. Then you can read through Joshua, and you'll read through it lightning fast as we crawl through it. But then you'll at least get a very recent picture of what's going on. But the common thing given throughout this is God's command to Joshua to be strong and courageous. It happens even back in Deuteronomy is the first time we'll cover that. He continually talks about Joshua being strong and courageous. And even that applying to other people in the conquest. And that's one of the things we'll look at is what times was Joshua strong and courageous? What times was he wasn't? Because we know that's the great thing about the Bible. It's not made up stories of superheroes. It's historical truth about real people who failed. Real people who were appointed by God to lead his people. And so it's great to see that. So Joshua 1:9, the full verse. Let me see if I can make that a little bit better for you. No, man, that's pretty dark. Okay, be strong and courageous. Oh, say it. He says, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. That was God's promise to Joshua, and we need to remember the context of this. For the Lord God is with you wherever you go. That's wherever Joshua is conquering. Not when you go to Starbucks. That's not necessarily what it's talking about. But that promise, because it's used for the people, is good one for us to know that God is with us wherever we go. I encourage you, it would be a good one to memorize during this whole series through Joshua. So, since this is an introduction, it's not going to be a full sermon-y time, if you really want to be preached at. We're going to have a little more of a Bible study-esque time, because we got to get all the historical facts and stuff and set the stage. I will have 3 points at the end, kids, so that you can fill out your little bulletins and then turn them in for some candy.
Yeah.
Actually, I read about a church where a pastor, that's a Villa Missions pastor, that was kind of doing the same thing we're doing, but he allowed the adults to get in on it too. So I might rethink that. If it gets the adults to start taking notes too. But yes, we're getting to the book. We got to set the stage. First book of the history is right after the Pentateuch. Author and the date. Of course, we want to know who wrote it, when did he write it, who did he write it to. Well, we don't really know for sure who the author is. It's called Joshua because it's about Joshua and life and the events during his life. We do know that the author wrote it as an eyewitness. Because in Deuteronomy 5, we have some first pronouns. He says, we did this. So that clues us in, the writer was part of this. This is not a writer hundreds of years later making this up. The writer was part of the events. We know it was written fairly shortly after the conquests, because Rahab, remember the lady in Jericho that housed the 2 spies and then let them go over. We know Rahab was still alive when this book was written, so it had to be written pretty shortly after the conquest. And the Jebusites were still in control of Jerusalem. Israel had not taken over Jerusalem yet. While Joshua probably could have written part of it or a good chunk of it, we know he didn't write all of it because of one big thing that happens at the end of the book. He dies. We have, just like in Deuteronomy, is written by Moses, but we know someone else added to it because we have accounts of Moses' death. And obviously Moses didn't write that. So the same thing with Joshua. Someone that had to write his account of his death. So it was written shortly after the conquest by an eyewitness. I'm going to hold it at that. I'm going to talk about dates here in a little bit because we want to establish dates. I'm a history guy. I like dates. That's what anchors this in history. It's not some arbitrary event where we can say, boom, it happened this year. And so we're going to do that. And to get to this point, we got to go all the way back to the Exodus and date the Exodus and then come up through there. We know I spent about 430 years down in Egypt, but we use 1 Kings, and I've got my slides out of order. I'll have to go back to that. 1 Kings as a good reference point for us. It says the Israelites left Egypt 480 years before the 4th year of the reign of Solomon. But thankfully, with the historical data, we know for a fact, without a doubt, with a historical fact, that the 4th year of Solomon's reign was 966 BC. So, okay, I'm really sorry. We're going to do math on a Sunday morning. Okay?
No.
I know, it's the Sabbath. That's okay. We can do math. Okay? So, we're going to do 966 plus 480 is 1446 BC. That is our date of the Exodus. 1446 BC. And then, if you want to go from there, well, we know they spent how many years wandering around the wilderness? 40 years. Yeah, so they spent 40. So that puts us at 1406 for the start of the conquest. And then we know from Judges that the conquest took about 7 years. And so 1399, we have the conquest complete. So the book was written probably shortly after that date, because the people in it were still alive at the time it was written. So that gives us our date. The dates are great. I love them. We can pin it on them. 1446 for the Exodus, 1406 for the start of the conquest after the 40 years of wandering, 7 years of conquest in 1399 BC. So I want to do now, as we got the dates, and I want to just do a brief flyover of history from what happened during the Exodus to the start of the conquest. So the Exodus goes back to 1446. And this is roughly the path. We don't know for sure of everything. 48 days they were wandering around after they crossed over. We don't know for sure where they crossed it. What we almost know for sure it's not down here. Somewhere up in here where they crossed the Reed Sea is what the Hebrew actually says. They wandered around for 48 days, and that's when they ran out of supplies, and God provided manna. And it was after that they were attacked by the Amalekites, or the many ites we're going to hear about, just so you know, a lot of ites, a lot of different people groups in this. And this was the battle that was famous because Moses held up his hands, the staff of God. And as long as he held his hands up, Israel pushed him back. When his hands got tired, they suffered. So they actually made a seat, and there was Aaron and I forgot the name of the other guy. Hur, yeah, thank you. Aaron and Hur that stood on either side of Moses and held his arms up. I mean, look at that. Imagine two guys holding the other guy's arms up in the air just so they could keep the staff of God in the air so they could defeat the Amalekites. Then they wandered around and they make their way down to Mount Sinai. What happened to Mount Sinai? Anything big? Yeah, the Ten Commandments, the Mosaic Law. Moses going up and receiving the word. But we know they were actually there for quite a while. Because they spent 48 days and making it down. Because we know that the tabernacle, and that's when he also got the instructions to build the tabernacle, was when he went up. And we know the tabernacle wasn't built until the first month of the second year after the Exodus. So Exodus, so 1446, so we're looking at 1444, because you subtract off for BC. 1444 is when the tabernacle was finally built down at Mount Sinai. And then, after that, they've got the tabernacle built. Then they start making their way north. Their main camp is actually Kadesh Barnea, right there. That's where they spend a lot of time. And that is also the site of the famous event where they sent the 12 spies into the land of Canaan. They sent them up here. They go see what the people group. They came here and they sent 12 of them up. And what did the majority of the spies tell Israel when they came back? Oh, they're big, they're huge. The giants. They've got walled cities. There's no way we can take them over. But there were two spies that told the truth. Anybody remember those two? Caleb and Joshua. We're going to come back to that. So, because they did not trust in God to provide, God banned them from going into Canaan. And he said, this generation must die away. So they spent 2 years from the Exodus getting up to this point till the incident of the spies. So 38 more years pass from the spy incident until that generation has died. And that gets us to 1406 BC. And that's when, at the end of Moses' life, he actually kind of begins the conquest by moving up through here. This is called the Transjordan area. And it starts conquering through here because this is the main promised land. That's what they're looking for. And Moses goes there, and you'll see there's actually a couple tribes that settle outside of here. They settle here instead of going on in. And it's Reuben and Gad and part of Manasseh would actually stay on this side of the Jordan. This is the Jordan River. Okay, that's the key river there where Joshua will lead the crossing over into Jericho right there. But Gad and Reuben would stay on this side, outside of the promised land, but with the agreement that they would provide soldiers to go and help with the conquest. And that's where we're at historically. Is they're all camped here, ready to cross over, and Jericho would be the very first city conquered. We'll talk about that next week. But let's get back to Joshua, the man Joshua. His name literally means the Lord is salvation. Does anybody remember his original name? Hosea. Yeah, Hosea. It's from Numbers 13. And that name meant he is salvation. And it was Moses that renames Joshua, Hosea, into Joshua. Not only saying he is salvation, but now the Lord is salvation. Changing the name to give him a better purpose. And that's when he's actually as a spy. He's getting ready to spy is when we're told his name is changed to Joshua. But the first time Joshua is mentioned is way back in Exodus. He's one of the generals that lead the defense against the Amalekites. When Moses had to hold his hands up, it was Joshua leading the defense on the ground. That was the first mention we have of him. The next time we hear him is, because that defense was somewhere over here when they were attacked by the Amalekites. So then they go down to Mount Sinai, and after Moses is given the Ten Commandments, as he's coming down, what has Israel done while he's been gone? Yeah, made a golden calf. And who was the first person to let Moses know that stuff was going wrong? Joshua. As Moses was coming down, he goes up, hey, just so you know, there's something going on over there. You better be prepared. So Joshua's already there. And then we jump to Exodus 33. As we have just a great picture. I love this picture of Joshua. They call him a young man. A young man. And he's also called like an assistant to Moses. So he worked closely with Moses. And they talked about in the tent of the meeting. So this was before the tabernacle. Before they had the tabernacle. He had a special tent, the tent of meeting, where Moses would go in and a cloud would descend down. And that signified the presence of the Lord. And Moses would go in and be. And then the crowds would come and see what was going on. And the person who would go with Moses in there? Joshua. And who stayed longer? Joshua. Moses would come back out, and it says that Joshua would stay in there longer with the presence of the Lord. He would stay in there as a young man. Then after Exodus, he reappears in Numbers 11. This is after Moses establishes the men to help run the day-to-day of the camp. And he's getting overwhelmed, and his father-in-law, Jethro, father-in-laws are good. Some of them. Family very well. But Jethro gives me the advice, hey man, you need to bring more men up and divvy up and have them take over responsibilities for you. And he does that, and immediately those men that were appointed started prophesying, and then they stopped. And then the next thing that happens is other men who weren't part of that appointment, they start prophesying. And Joshua goes running to Moses. Moses, they're prophesying over there. And Moses actually goes, who am I to say you can prophesy? Be quiet. You're wrong. Don't stop them. So Joshua gets put in his place. He gets he's like, ooh, I stepped outside of something there. He reappears again in Numbers 13, and the famous was one of the spies sent into Canaan. And him and Caleb were the only ones that held true to what they really saw. And it's not until the very end of Numbers, and then chronologically, Numbers is happening. End of Numbers is right there, and you have Joshua. It's not to the very end of Numbers that God appoints Joshua to lead Israel. In Moses in Deuteronomy, Moses' last big speech, his last big sermon to the people. And we also have this, 31:23. And the Lord commissioned Joshua, and the son of Nun, and said, "Be strong and courageous, for you shall bring the people of Israel into the land that I swore to them. I will be with you." So it's not until the very end of Moses' life that all of a sudden Joshua knows, oh, I'm going to be in charge now. Okay. Thank you, Lord. And even in Deuteronomy, be strong and courageous. He's already in it. Obviously, he's going to be on a military mission. It takes a lot of bravery there. So that's who Joshua is, what the book is all about. What I'm going to do now is talk about, just briefly, how was Joshua ready to go from an assistant to Moses to now leading the people? How was he ready when God called him to the next thing in life? And that's going to be ready for what God has next for you. How do we do that? How do we equip ourselves? And I know we have a lot of retirees and stuff, and they might think, God doesn't have anything for me next, But ask Glenn when you retired, and then God kind of called you to find a smaller church to go to. Were you thinking, look back 6 years that you would be in the position you're at now 6 years ago? No, I didn't. But God prepared him. God put him here. And then Ted offered to disciple anyone he wanted to be discipled. And Glenn stood up and says, yes, I want some one-on-one discipleship. And that was a preparation. That God was preparing him for that, to be the chairman of the board now, a deacon. You're doing awesome things for the kingdom now. You did awesome things for the National Forest. Now you're doing awesome things for the kingdom of God. So we never know what God has in store for you. All right? Whether it may be a life event you have coming up, maybe something is coming down the line, or it may be something out of the blue that comes out that God puts on your heart. Like us, we're doing the Air Force 20 years. We'll worry about making a decision at 20 years. And God said, how about you now? That blindsides. So how do we prepare ourselves for that? So we have to be ready for what God has next for us. And we're going to look at these events in Joshua's life to give us 4 things. I know I only put 3, so I decided to add a 4th one after I printed the bulletins. So if I'm going to do the first one, how to prepare is to do the right thing in the small things. Do the right thing in the small things. Yeah, that's the one you got to write in on your bulletin. Sorry, I added that one. So Joshua, he would become the leader of Israel to lead the conquest. But if you look back in his life, he had events that helped lead up to that. Even as a very young general, in that he led the defense, but that was under the direction of Moses. Moses was one who appointed him to do that. And that event was more about Moses keeping his hands up than what Joshua was doing on the ground. But that's one thing to help him to become to be ready for what God has for him. As Moses was coming down, he didn't just step back and say, "Ooh, Moses is not going to like this. I'm just going to step back and let the fireworks happen." He was proactive. He said, "Moses, hey, before you see what's going on here, you need to know there's some bad stuff going on. Just to prepare you." He took charge. That was a small thing. Whether or not he adjusted Moses wasn't going to change it, but he did it anyway. He did the right thing in the small things. So just because if you think what you're doing is small and insignificant, doesn't mean we do it less well. If we cut corners in the little things you don't think matter, that will spill over to your thinking when you're dealing with things that do matter. Things that do matter. We've got to do the small things right. I think that's why my kids don't like it when I'm around for chore day. Because I do not let them get around not doing the chores halfway. If they're not going to do the chores full out in the way they should be, I'm not going to give them more responsibility, more freedom until they show me they can do the right thing in the small things. If I can't get them to clean a toilet right, I'm not going to let them do other things. I think it was a Patton that said something, General Patton, that said, you can't get the soldiers to walk the way you want them to walk, to dress the way you want them to dress. How are you going to get them to die for the country? The small things you must get right. When I was in the Air Force, and I had airmen under me, and one of the small things we had was trash duty. And the nice thing about, work area, we would go by section. Okay, this section has trash duty this week. And honestly, as a leader of these guys, I'd even watch how they handled their trash duty for that week. Was it the same person jumping, oh, I got it, I'll do the trash, jumping right out there and doing the right thing in the small thing? Or was there a guy going, oh, they're doing it, I don't have to do it. I get out of it. Which person am I going to look at to give more responsibility to? The person that's doing the right things in the small things. And that is with your life too. Are you doing the right things and the small things in your life, in your relationship with God? When no one else is around, are you reading your Bible? When no one else is around, are you praying to God? Are you talking with Him? Are you acting and doing the things that the Bible tells us we should be doing? We've got to be doing the right things in the small things. We can't cut corners. Katie's dad, is just retired from teaching at Biola University. It's a Christian college down in the LA area. Very good, solid, conservative college. He was a PE teacher, coach for many years, and one of his PE classes, he had a student, and he was a great teacher. He had a student that, he had developed a rapport with her, having her in previous classes, and he knew that she wanted to be a doctor. And she came to him and said, I have to drop this PE class. I just got too much going on right now. I need to drop it. And it was just a PE class. And you know what Matt did? This is doing the right things and the small things. He looked at her and says, when you have a patient on the table, and their life is in your hands, and you get overwhelmed, are you going to be able to drop that patient? You do the right things and the small things now to prepare you for what's ahead. I need to say that girl did not drop this class. She stayed with it and learned a valuable lesson. You've got to do the right things and the small things. Next thing we learn from Joshua, and this one really is the biggest one, but I'm doing them chronologically, so it flows chronologically. But this one is definitely the most important. Spend time with God. Spend time with God. We talked about when the tent of the meeting and both Moses and Joshua would go in, and the cloud of the presence of the Lord would come down, and Moses would leave. And usually when Moses would leave and the tent was empty, the cloud would go back up. But Moses would leave and Joshua would stay. And the presence of the Lord would stay. He would just be there in the presence of the Lord. Now, we don't know what went on there. We don't have that. But how much do you think that affected his ability later in life to trust in God when it came to leading his people? He spent time with God. It's the best thing we can focus on. It's the best thing we can work on. If you're wondering where God is in your life, spend time with Him to find out. If you're seeking direction in life, if you want to know what's next, spend time with that person who has ordained your future. Spend time with the person who can reveal it to you. Spend time with God. We talked about our escapades and getting Katie to marry me. Remember, we were dating, but I knew I was moving, because thanks to the Air Force, I was moving. And I really liked her. And I wanted direction, Lord, what do I do here? And what did he say? He didn't give me the answer. He said, focus on me. And for a week, I spent every waking moment I had outside of work, outside of anything, just fasting and in worship and in prayer by myself in my apartment. Every minute I had of that week, focusing on him. And at the end of it, he revealed. We were just, I thought she was hot and I really liked her. And that's where I was at it. I wasn't even looking at marriage. I was just, Lord, do I continue in this? And he revealed, she's going to be your wife. I got the direction not because I sought the answer to my thing. I sought God first. And he revealed it to me then. After I sought God first, I spent time with him. We must spend time with God to be ready for whatever he has for us next in our lives. Next, associate with fellow Christians, fellow believers. Joshua, we talked about, he was an assistant to Moses. He spent a lot of time around Moses. He saw how Moses handled himself in those pressure times. He saw how things are done. He learned from him. We are influenced by the people around us, whether we like it or not. We are influenced. If you're around someone who's always negative, you start to become negative yourself. You like to be around people that are positive because they influence you to be positive. You got someone who complains about the same thing over and over again. You start thinking about that. Who are the people you are around influence how you think. And if you're a believer, if you're a follower of God, yet you don't spend any time with the family of God, you're not going to have that good influence in your life of how to be a part of the family of God. You've got to be part of the family of God. Spend time with them, not just on Sunday mornings, but throughout the week, different times of the week. That's why I like we have our midweek services. There's a lot of churches these days that don't have midweek services anymore. The only time they see each other is on Sunday mornings. That Wednesday night service is great. I love it. I encourage you. I'll be honest. I don't care in what state you come. If you're coming right off of work and you need to bring food to be part of it, I'm fine with that. I remember Donnell. She was literally dying of cancer. She couldn't even sit upright. But she would come to those Bible studies. She would come in and lay down on the pews down there. And that's where she would be a part of Bible study. She made an attempt. She knew she needed to be there. So sorry, I do kind of hang that over people who try to come up with excuses for not coming. When I said, look at what the commitment that Donnell had to being in God's Word and being with His people. We need to be there. And as I say, I don't care in what shape you're there. Just be there. Just be there. We need to be together. Lastly, be ready to face failure, even when you're right. Failures will come in our lives. As Joshua had. When he went and he ran and told Moses, these guys are prophesying over here. We better stop that. And Moses goes, what? No. You're wrong. We don't control that. He failed. And it was his fault. And then you fast forward to when he was a spy and he came back and he did the right thing, yet he was not able to influence the leaders of Israel to go into Canaan. He did everything right, but he failed in leading the people of Israel to make the right decision. We're going to face failures. We're going to face failures in our lives. We got to be ready to face it when it happens, even when we're right. And I'm sure people in here I know have worked, you've been in that time and you're facing something that you weren't the source of, but yet you have to face it. You have to clean up someone else's mess, or maybe you made a mess of your own, and you have to clean it up. You got to be ready to face failure. There's too many times churches today that are telling Christian life is all about happiness and loving, and nothing's going to go wrong. That's bull honky, That's a theological term. I think the Apostle Paul said it somewhere. Failure is going to happen in our lives. We live in a fallen world. It's going to happen. Prepare yourself for when it does happen. So, conclusion, to wrap this up. We need to be ready for what God has next for us in our lives. Sometimes we may know there's a major decision coming down in our lives. We may know there's something coming. And we're just seeking His direction on what that may be. And there may be something that comes up totally out of the blue. How are we going to be prepared to deal with it? Do the right thing in the small things. Build your character, your integrity now. So when God asks you for bigger things, you're ready. You're not going to cut corners. It's easy to do the easiest thing that is for me. It's harder to do the best thing that I should be doing. And that's what you need to focus on. Not what's the easiest thing, what's the best thing you need to do. We need to spend time with God. That's honestly the biggest. I should have bolded that, italicized it, underlined it, put it in a twice as big as font. Spend time with God. If you're wondering, God, what do you have for me in my life, but you're not spending any time with Him? Well, yeah. If you're wondering, God, speak to me, Lord, but you're not reading your Bible, guess what? He already spoke to us. Read it. He's there. Spend time with Him. Associate with fellow believers. We need fellowship with the saints. We need to be together as a family. Especially, I love in this small setting, this small church, this is where faith grows. Because we have one another to lean on. We have one another to share our failures with. We have one another to share our rejoices with. We have one another to mourn together with. We're not part of a big church where we don't know anybody. We know each other here. And that's how church should be. And we don't only see each other on Sunday mornings, but see each other throughout the week. On a Wednesday night service, or just stopping by and checking in on somebody and seeing how they're doing. We need to be with people. But be ready to face failure when it comes. Be ready to face failure when it comes. You guys remember the movie Facing the Giants? There's a scene of the guy that always been coming down and praying over the lockers of the students. He comes into the coach's room, the football coach's room, and office, and he shares some words, some encouraging words for him. And the coach follows us and says, "Did you think that God had that for us?" He's like, "Yes, I knew. God wanted me to share those words with." And the football coach shared his expression and his frustration of he wants to see God work in this school. He wants to see God move in these students. He wants good things to happen. And he's frustrated with it because nothing good is happening. Well, the other guy responds back with the story of two farmers. They're both praying for rain. I didn't think of this before you shared your thing for rain. Two farmers praying for rain. And only one went out and tilled his fields and prepared his fields for the rain. Which one truly trusted in God to deliver? Which one are you? Are you wanting God to do something in your life? You're wanting to know what's next? What are you doing about it? Are you wanting God to reveal His plan and want clarification and issue one, a way forward on something? Earnestly seek Him. Work on these 4 things. That shows that you trust God will deliver. Let's pray. Father, we thank You for today. We thank You that we can get together and worship You and learn about Your word. Oh, Lord, we just thank You for how You used Joshua. You molded him You know, even though you didn't reveal to him until right before Moses' death that he was to take over, Lord, you were molding him through various things to get him ready for what you had next. And Lord, I pray that as we seek you out, as we seek direction in our lives, as we seek what's next, oh Lord, we will look to the life of Joshua and how you molded and shaped his life. You had events in his life to mold him into the leader you wanted him to be. That's a model for us. Lord, we thank you for these good words. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.